looking back, my village is nice. I mean, urban, or it's an urban area now. My village was Ekpoma. The village was known as Emaundo. The best reference in terms of personality is Professor Ambrose Ali. That's where it comes from. My father was a farmer. My grandfather, really, Akhaine. We all grew up under the shadow of the man. A very disciplined man and a big farmer. Had large landed properties, in the community. And so my immediate father, my biological father, was also under the shadow of the patriarch, Akhaine, in the family. So usually you learn in the traditional African setting by just following what you see. You go to the farm, you learn how to take care of the crops, and all of that. So that's the way you learn. You don't have an institutionalized form of learning the way we do now, where you go to the classroom and all of that. That never existed. So whatever skills or profession your parents were in, you of course imbibe them and you learn them and they become part of you, So that was it. And that discipline comes with courage. You can wake up at 5, and head to the bush. That is courage. You've conquered the fear of the night, or whatever is on the way, and the rest of them. That was it. And when we close in the primary school, we also go and join them at the farm. We go join them in the farm and come back. So that was, a great deal of discipline. And also, we had our mini farms. So you work with your parents in the big farms during the normal, weekdays. On Sunday, which is like the resting period, we also go to our mini farm, which is closer to the home, and all of that. So you can see you imbibe almost everything that the family does, and you also replicate it in your own way. So for me, I know the value of farms. When I at the Lagos State University, where I am now, when I walk out, you have this, what they call these gardeners, planting vegetables and the rest of them. When I look at the vegetables, there's a certain, feeling I get because I know what it is to watch crops grow and the rest of them. So the substance of all of this background is productivity. The question about being idle wasn't there. Indolence wasn't there at all. You have to be productive, and that's what you call labor emulation. You know your role, and you don't wait to be told what to do, and the rest of them. So for me, we are missing all of that in contemporary times. For the young ones that are growing up. So from there, primary school, Upugele Primary School. It used to be called St. John's. But by the time we were leaving 1977, it was called Upugele Primary School. And from there, my time coincided with a time there was a great competition for education. In the then Bender State, there were these great schools. You want to go to any of them. An association, Catholic College in Irua. You have Bishop Kelly in Benin, Edo College, Benin, Ughelli Government College, UGR, in Delta now. So those big schools, St. John Bosco in Ubiaja, Esan Grammar School in Uromi, and all of those ones. We were competing to be there. In fact, there is this joke I normally make. Those of us who didn't enter secondary school on time, when your mates come back during holidays wearing their school vest, we become jealous. So there was something to spur us, all of the time, and all of that. From there, so getting into secondary school was highly competitive. Today you see, I don't know how they do it now. somebody will come out with 8 credits, not just 8 credits, 8 A's. I don't know how they do it now. In my time, we were not, poor academically, but it was difficult to make those grades. And your result might even be seized. You have to go and receipt for another round of WAEC examinations. So we did all of that, all with the hope of getting to the university. And I remember I wrote my JAM, must have written JAM about 3 times. You write your JAM with the hope that you are going to make all the combinations that you require to enter into the university, and you don't get it. So I kept, in terms of choice of university, I wanted to go to University of Benin, which was, of course, the closest to me in the then Bende. I tried, it didn't quite work out. I tried to go to, I would have been the second set in Bende State University when it was created, Ambrosali. I tried, it didn't work out. But so something happened. There was one Osasona, who was, I think he was a lecturer in Ambrosali, and he happened to be a friend, he was friends with my uncle. And so he was aware that I was having this difficulty in gaining admission into the university. He just told my uncle, why not let him go to Lagos and do this course at the Nigerian Institute of Journalism. It was called Certificate in Advanced Writing and Specialized Reporting. It was not meant for a greenhorn like me. It was meant for practicing, media practitioners. My colleagues were Utia Ukukena, who is late now. He was the PRO of FEDECO. What they call it, the NECON, not before FEDECO, after the one associated with FEDECO. He was the PRO. Then I remember Abubakar Hassan, who was the PRO of Ajakuta Steel Mill. There was one Kazaure. I think there was this paper in the north, not the New Nigeria. Was it not Herald? Triumph, something like that, yeah. Then you had, there was this other guy who was I think he was deputy manager in NTA Sokoto. These were my classmates. I think this sports writer who was in the Guardian joined us. I remember very well. So, but that program turned out to be very exciting for me, because I had interest in writing, and as far back as when I left secondary school, my first attempt at writing was I wrote a book on Awolowo. It was titled The Oasis, and that took me to Ikene to meet Papa, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And he recommended that book to Spectrum. Shortly after he did, he died. So nobody could to pursue it. And I don't forget that when I was leaving, he gave me 20 naira. 20 naira was very big, 1985. Went back to Lagos. But it was not even the money. The fact that I could shake the hand of the sage was exciting for me. And looking back, I said to myself, look, I could have kept that 20 naira as a souvenir. But at that time, it was, it was something that it was, some money that I could use. So that was in terms of measuring my ambition, And my earliest heroes were, Pa Obafemi Awolowo, Ole Soyinka, then, of course, Kaduna Ozeogo, the man who led the first military coup d'etat. In terms of his commitment, patriotism, and disinterestedness in himself. A man who could tell you that if I don't come out in 15 minutes, take care of me and the target. So those were my earliest heroes. And I remember I read The Man Died even before I left secondary school. And I was to reread that work again when I was writing my master's, thesis. So the other part of me, which was innate, was to detest anything oppressive. I remember in the secondary school that I started with, where I was one of the pioneers, Opoji Grammar School. We led a protest against being shortchanged with this food they cook for Children's Day. I remember now, the key cow and the rest of them. So they did this, and they brought the rice, and we didn't see the cow. So I led a boycott of it. It got to, I had a relative who was a teacher in that secondary school. So they were looking for the ringleaders, and they called a general assembly. And they said, those who are not part of it should leave. That's what it was, leaving. It made about 4 of us or so. So they took 4 of us to the staff room to find out who was the ringleader. We still insisted that we were not eating. And they said, well, if you don't eat, that we know that there's going to be trouble. So they went to the extent, those days, traditionally you could go to Ifa to know who is the ringleader. But they used this key with the Bible, calling our name to know who the ringleader was. So eventually they prevailed on us, used all kinds of pressure to beg us and the rest of them, because if we don't eat the rice, probably there will be an indictment. It's already an indictment, and those days in the inspectorate, they ask questions. So after much persuasion, we calmed down and allowed the process to go on. So that was one earliest example of my attitude towards resistance. And so by the time I left secondary school, I got inducted into radical literature. There was a relative of mine, Mr. Isi Mamadou. He's now a German resident. He graduated from Ife, Bafemi University, then the University of Ife. And he was privileged to be taught by Professor Toyo Olorode and the so-called Ife collectives at that time. And when he graduated, he started what we call a study group in the village. So a few of us went there, and he gave us some radical literature. He gave me one like I recall very well, The Dialectics of Nature by Friedrich Engels. If you read the dialectics of nature, you virtually understand everything about science. Science and its relation to social life. So, that literature, Communist Manifesto, the other one was Anti-Durin, also by Friedrich Engels. Anti-Durin will teach you polemics, everything about polemics. So, by the time I entered the university, I was already radicalized in terms of world outlook, and all of that. So when I left Ekpoma for Lagos, to start the NIJ program, so there were other comrades who were, belonged to those radical movements. There was one Femi Ahmed, those days we call him Sandinista. And so he was in charge of the cell that I belonged to, the Patriotic Labor Movement. So when I came into Lagos, we normally try to establish what we call front organizations. And Femi, we established what we call Nigerian Tenants Association. It might interest you to know that I became the first general secretary, even though I was 40, at that time. And what we did by, putting you in those organizations is to learn leadership, writing minutes, and articulating proceedings. So I learned it through that, period until I entered the University of Lagos, Then when I got to the University of Lagos, we then established what we call Marxist-Leninist Study Group. There were these radical boys who came from Kwaratek, Bengal, Awekbo, who ran for the presidency, people under People's Trust. Olaiton Yoride, who was private secretary to Adam Soshomole, but he died in Benin. You had Bala Muhammad, who was a lecturer in UNIMED, where he was doing his master's at the University of Lagos. You had Ukem Onyekpe, you know, there was Andy Kanabe, and a host of others. So we formed what we call the Marxist Learning Study Group. The UNILAG Student Union was banned, you know, during that period. So we resuscitated the union. I brought the union back by, you know, launching a protest against the management at the Senate building in UNILAG. So we got the union back, and so we got involved in the student union politics. And you know, there's always contestation. The management will want somebody who will be amenable to them, and we wanted independent student unionism. So we did that. The first year, management managed to get one of theirs, Madoju Timi Phillips. Atlanta died, God bless his soul, you know, to become the union president. I ran, after Madoju Timi, I think I ran for the presidency, you know, and again, I lost to Papa Chris. Chris Anyanze is also late now, you know. That led to crisis at the university because I won the whole of Akoka campus. They rigged it at the Diaraba. You can see some of these things you see today at the Diaraba campus. And we said no. Nobody can be sworn in unless I was sworn in. So that led to my rustication, you know, in the university. And we didn't give up. We went to court. We went to court. I think we were about, I can't remember the number, by 11 or so. Our counsel was Femi Falano. You know, so, and we were out of campus for almost a year. And at the end of the day, we won the case. It was Justice Onalaja who ruled in our favor by asking the question, what is indiscipline under the law? Because we follow all the procedure in our communication with the management. So it became a landmark judgment, you know. That was it. So I went back to write my degree, my final year exam as a single candidate. You know, the previous year I lost a year because the previous year I would have served in Calabar. So then my result was, when it was eventually released, you know, I was deployed to Sokoto. And I deployed back to Lagos because the period coincided with the June 12, you know, crisis. And we read the atmosphere and said, if the crisis burst open, we were going to be consumed in the north, you know. And so we deployed back to Lagos. Myself, GT Okunye, Niyi, and so many others, I can't remember their names now. We deployed back, you know, to Lagos. And of course, you know what that crisis led to. Snowballed into so many crises, renewed authoritarianism with Abacha coming in and the rest of them. So when we finished our service, because of my stint in journalism, so even while I was on campus, I was reporting for The Guardian, you know, the art desk, because the guy who mentored me was Ben Tomoloju, you know, the doyen of Nigerian cultural journalism, you know. So I was reporting for The Guardian while at the University of Lagos. So because of that, my journalistic background, the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights was formed, and Bekora Sokuti was the chairman. So I was brought in to edit the newsletter, which we call The Victims. You know, I was editing that for a time. And in the course of the crisis, the struggle against the military and all of that, I was again elevated to become the General Secretary of the Campaign for Democracy in Nigeria. And you know the implication of that. I succeeded Chima Ubani. You know, I was elected at the Ibadan convention of the organization. So few months after I was elected, I was arrested by the military and taken away to Brinikabi prisons for 1 year. You know, I was released when the Commonwealth delegation came to Nigeria. I had a meeting with Abacha. Abacha wanted to please them, so he released a few of us, myself, Adeniji Adele, who is late now, one Eno, who was Abiola's whether personal secretary or personal assistant also at that time. So that was it. And when I came out, of course, the crisis, when I was released, the crisis hadn't ended at all, you know. And my chairman was taken away, Becker was taken to Katsina prison. So we were all dispersed. Shehu Sani was taken to Kirikiri, later to Aba prison. So it was my task again to reorganize the organization. We did that, and we then transited to the United Action for Democracy. All the forces reaggregated under that umbrella. We then made Olisa Agbakoba as the convener. Myself and Chima Ubani became the joint secretary of the United Action for Democracy. So we were on that when General Abacha dropped dead. And I then, reflected on my career. At that level, I decided that I should go back to school. So I did my master's quietly at the Lagos State University, and went to the University of London to pick up my doctorate in politics. So that marked my journey into the academia. But then I became active in the civil society, and involved in research. I formed the Center for Constitutionalism and Demilitarization that publishes the Constitution, a journal for constitutional development. And under that platform, I carried out governance training across 3 of the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Some of the alumni of SENCOD, many prominent people, Lalong, the former minister, was an alumnus of SENCOD, of that center. Orelokpe, who is in the Center for Sustainable Development in Abuja. In fact, she was sent by the president. Then he was governor of Lagos State, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Sent almost about 6 commissioners to me, to train in the SENCOD Summer School of Governance and the rest of them. So from there, I then decided to move into full research by entering into the academia at the Lagos State University. Because of my strength in research, I've written enough to be a professor even before I joined the system. So I entered Lagos State University as a senior lecturer, and rose through the ranks to become a professor in 2017, in political science. So, and in terms of the content of my scholarship, it's liberating. It's about, how to transform the society. And it's about, underscoring the problems that the continent faces, And I've written so many books. My essays are over 100, so including books. One of them, which I think is very seminal, is Patrons of Poverty. IMF, World Bank, and Africa's Problem. And I also wrote, of course, detailed a volume on globalization and the fringe players. The way it affects the global South. I did that, and just like so many articles in terms of trying to understand Nigeria's problem and transform them. I think the first stage is the power of conviction. You must at each point in time define, your role, because one of the greatest problems is that we are born into this world. Sometimes, as one French philosopher, I guess, said, we don't know the cause of birth, and we don't also know the cause of departure. So we just find ourselves in this space. So when you find yourself in this space, you define it. And if you do a summing up, you discover that the only thing relevant is to live your life for humanity. And so you have to, how do you create that space? It means that all those strictures, structural constraints on people actualizing themselves, you have to, help to fight them. You have to subvert them so that people can, fully realize their lives. And so I believe that I have that power of conviction. One, and conviction comes with commitment. Commitment is very, very important in whatever you do. You define your aim, then you are committed to it, and you pursue it. But what I also learned, I'm not sure whether I was influenced by Chief Obafemi Awolowo's biography. You discover that nobody really helps anybody. So it is always good to carve a path of independence so that you don't go begging to feed yourself. It's very important. I mean, if I say this, I'm not saying that you have to be materialistic. That's not the point I'm making. But independence in ways that you become self-sufficient. Because that's the only way, you can also live your life meaningfully. If you are not well, if you are unhealthy, you can't pursue goals and the rest of them. So independence is very, very important. As you will find out, I'm sure many of us here have experienced that. Nobody helps anybody. It doesn't mean there are exceptional cases, that people can come to your rescue and say, let me help you. Always, we're on our own, and the social measures, which of course are embedded in the African system, traditional society, have been eroded now. The reason why you don't have a high suicide rate in Africa is because of that extended family system. If you see your cousin, even if 10th cousin, and you complain, you can share some of his, things with you. He will give you food, he will share clothes with you and the rest of them. So against that background, we don't commit suicide. The suicide rate in Africa is low. Unlike places like Japan, where you now have suicide police, monitoring people who want to jump into the river and the rest of them, and elsewhere in Europe. So self-reliance is very important. And I think that what is rampant these days is the antisocial behavior of our youth. They need to, also refocus their energy towards being self-reliant and be creative, and do things that are productive. Our country is a very great country, potentially great country. And if you've traveled to other parts of the world, you will understand why we need to build this country and create sanity zones. That again tells you why I'm in politics. Because I believe that even if I were to, amass huge resources, I will not be able to transform beyond my immediate family. But if you want to transform society and community, you need state power, which is why the quest for leadership becomes very important for me. Well, incidentally, I was one of the first persons in the country to organize a national conference on the 1999 Constitution in 2000, just a year after the transition, program. In that conference, I recall very well, Issa Sage was there. The late Bala Jubri Mohammed was there. I think Odion Akhaine was there. So many prominent Nigerians were in that conference. And at that time, if you don't understand the constitution making, you have what we call, there's what we call a people's-led kind of process of making constitution. That means that the people must partake in the articulation of the provisions of the constitution. It's actually called process-led. That was the word I was looking for. So that people can own that process. The spirit of that discourse, of that debate, will be of course embedded in that constitutional, provisions. The place it was well, demonstrated is Ethiopia, after the civil war in Ethiopia. The Ethiopia constitution was a process-led one. They even dramatized the provisions of that constitution to the ordinary people to understand what was being, talked about. That was why I was shocked that Abiye could go to war in Tigray, because the Ethiopia constitution has a clause that says whoever wants to go out of the union, if you want to go out of the union, there's an article you can activate in the constitution and you leave. So if Tigrayans wanted to go, why was Abiy trying to stop them? Why is it that the government there refused to follow the lay down a constitutional path to resolve such crisis instead of, bloodletting that happened in Ethiopia? So in the case of Nigeria, we talked about the fact that Nigeria entered into post-colonial life on the basis of a federal constitution. Largely issues of derivation were taken care of in the constitution. If you look at the 1966 Republican Constitution, even 1960, derivation was there, which I thought it was almost about 50%, of resources from the regions and the rest of them. So after the Civil War, centralism, because military ruled by edit and decrease, and it's a central command, that collapsed essentially the federal structure and undermined it completely. Even civil service within the regions were now united on a national basis. So that is the problem. You have a military head of state who dictates, everything that happens in the regions. That was the problem. Now, the 79 Constitution was an attempt, to strengthen the federal system so that what they call separatist tendency of the early 60s will not be there. But again, in a way, it atomized the federal essence of the Nigerian, constitution. So the 1999 Constitution, one of the things we found out is that as at the time it was compacted or put together, there were 68 items under the exclusive list, the exclusive legislative list. And compare that to the residual list, where the state has legislative competence. It was infinitesimal. So we felt that there are items on the 68 exclusive items on this exclusive list that ought to be either concurrent or residual, to the states. So that is the problem. So the states are largely de-empowered with the 1999 Constitution. The states are largely de-empowered. And there are aspects of the Constitution that are not enforceable. I think the directive principles of state policy, I think chapter 2 or so, are not enforceable, and all of that. So what you then have is that what Ekweremadu call Fidiboto federalism. Everybody run to Abuja. Creativity is dead, and the rest of them. And it has, of course, feared what you call a consumerist orientation of the governing elite and the larger society. So these are the problems. And so refederalizing, as we have argued, will mean that more powers should be devolved to the states and the rest of them. The last assembly tried to do it haphazardly. Electricity, as you know now, is now under concurrent. And which other one, railway, is now concurrent. So for me, that's some gains of the long-term agitation for devolution of power. But we still need to do more. Well, I think that there is a conflation of meaning when you talk about restructuring. You talk about devolution of power. You talk about refederalizing the polity. Largely they converge. We are saying that there are contradictions within the Nigerian, system, the polity. Therefore, we need to deal with those polity problems, by restructuring. Restructuring means that the component nationalities of this country, should exercise some measure of autonomy, in their area of jurisdiction. You want to, for example, now we have NUC that determines almost everything for universities. Universities is on the concurrent, education is on the concurrent list. State government can establish their own standards for universities, So when you have all of those things, those are the contradictions in the Nigerian federal system. When things that are supposed to belong to the units, are being concentrated in the center. That's the problem. So you are talking about rearranging that relationship between the center and the units. That's what restructuring is all about. Because right now it is skewed. Let me give you an example. The local government structures in the country, you know, they were arbitrarily created by the military, from OBJ to, you know, the last administration. And those arbitrarily created local governments are constitutionalized. I think they are the third or second schedule of the constitution. They are there. I'm not quite sure which of the schedule, you know, that we have today, which was why the Lagos attempt to create more didn't quite go through constitutionally, you know. Now, we are trying here in Nigeria to make local government as a unit of the Nigerian Federation. For me, it is wrong-headed. That's one of the contradictions. If federalism is usually an agreement between the unit and the center. In fact, we should not even, when we use unit, we are not substantial. You talk about people. Federalism is a product of people saying we want to live together as one country based on the following terms. So you cannot create a local government structure and make it a unit, you know, of a federal arrangement, of a federal agreement. Rather, local government should be mere administrative, you know, structures of the units of the federation. That is to say, Lagos can decide to create as many as 100 local governments if they like. They can reduce it to 10 if they like. You know, the question about reifying the local government structure as if it's a unit of the Nigerian federal arrangement, you know, is a major contradiction. Because what they have done, when you do that, those local governments that were arbitrarily created in the first place, you then reify them because they draw resources directly from the center, from the federation account. So Kano has 44, is it 44 or 40 local government, you know, areas. Lagos has, you know, 20. Lagos has 20. And they all draw resources from the central, from the federation account. So you can see, obviously, there's an obvious disempowerment or cheating within that system. So that is why we must resist. When they talk about local government financial autonomy, so when you talk about local government financial autonomy, it's nothing other than aggrandizing those arbitrarily created local governments. If you move around this country, local government exists in name in some parts of the country. Just in name, nothing happens. Nothing, in terms of functionality, you don't see any activity to show that this is a local government, you know, structure in action. It's not there. So these are the contradictions. When people are talking about the structuring, you know, it will also mean that the existing local government structure can be dissolved or expurgated from the constitution. Allow states to create local government that they want to create to govern their own sphere of activities. So when you do that, this argument about local government autonomy will fizzle out. The state's assembly will now make law for the, you know, smooth running of local government. As subsidiarity structures, we already know what their roles are, but the state government will then provide enabling laws. Whether the state also need to create some grants for them, you know, how much they can raise from the activities that they normally do or carry out, all of that will be spelled out. So the question about reifying the LGL as a unit of the Nigerian Federation will be eliminated. That's one contradiction. Now, you will recall that states had their constitution. Regions in Nigeria had their own constitution before. They even had what they call them, consular services in other countries of the world. Just something like ambassadorial or diplomatic missions. You know, they had. State had. Western Nigeria had, you know, their own missions. Though not of the status of, you know, what you have today. You know, they had that. That was much of the autonomy that the units of the Nigerian Federation, the regions enjoyed. And there was a great deal of competition Go to ABU Zaria. You see that structure, was not just any structure. You can't find those structures again. Go to Ife. The Museum of Natural History in Ife is an architectural piece that can raise money for that university if you turn them into postcards. You can't have that structure anywhere. You can't have two of that structure anywhere in the world. So the regions knew what they wanted. They knew what they wanted. There was strict competition, and development was being driven. But today, development is not on the agenda. If you go to the National Assembly, legislative business is maybe perhaps 10%. People are looking for LPO contracts, and the rest of them. And even in the First Republic, when the regions were truly autonomous, legislative business was part-time. Councillors were part-time, councillors. That was what we had. And yet they were committed. They were men who were respected in the community with character and all that. Today, it's the only game in town. People believe you can make money by going into politics. If you look at the academic staff union of universities, the crisis has always been about underfunding of the universities, the tertiary institutions in the country. Or not just even tertiary institutions, the educational sector. If you look at budgetary allocation vis-a-vis other sectors of the national economy, you discover that education is not prioritized. So that has created problems between academic staff union and the Nigerian government. Autonomy happens in different ways. The way we are in Nigeria today, in which every institution and agency of government go to the center to collect money from the federation account, will not allow university to have full autonomy, because you still rely on subvention, from the federal government, to run, or the state government, as the case may be, But creating your own resource base, financial autonomy, is still problematic, because you can't charge higher, tuition fees. Private institutions are doing that, and you know what it is. Your children can't go, my children can't go there. But even at that, they rely on, the faculty members in the federal institutions to teach in those institutions, because we resource for them. So, ASU has always made a patriotic case for funding of education. And ASU doesn't just make a case, they provide solutions. There was a document ASU produced in the 80s titled How to Save Nigeria. The third fund that you see today was a product of that articulation. It was ASU that articulated this third fund, which comes from the money in third fund is education tax. ASU provided anything they asked for, they provide a solution. Even the last element of the crisis, EPs, these integrated personnel, payment services. ASU said, look, the nature of the federal, the educational institutions are such that you can't lump us with EPs. ASU then provided what they call UTAS, University Transparency and Accountability System, that will take care of the peculiarities within the system. So ASU will make a case. When they protest, they review and justify. That's what ASU does, And I would say that ASU is one of the most patriotic organizations in this country. In fact, the last organization standing in terms of providing, solutions and critical engagement with the state actors. So it is made to look like a problem because of irresponsibility of the midas of the Nigerian state. Elsewhere in the world, education is always prioritized. some places education takes a larger chunk of the national budget. Because if you have an educated population, it is easy to govern. It's easy to govern and the rest of it. So I don't look at it as age-long crisis. If we have a productive national economy, federal government may not need to even fund the university, because product of research, companies will buy into them, and therefore university can survive on royalty. For instance, University of Michigan, survives on royalty, particularly from the automobile industry in Detroit, in the United States of America. Now, but even at that, the state has not shirked its responsibility of giving subvention to a university that is super rich. That's the United States. But here, and you know the trend, all of us in government take our children to universities abroad. And Nigeria's universities in the 70s and 80s and the 60s were stronger than those universities. If you bring a degree from America, Nigerian university system here, they don't regard it those days. If you bring from Canada, they don't even look at it at all. Except maybe Britain, because our system was modeled after Britain. But today, we bring all kinds of degrees now. We are proud to label it University of Hull, University of Birmingham, State University, Florida. Whereas Nigerian, the faculty in Nigeria, in Nigerian universities, were very solid and strong, attracting international, academics to come into Nigeria. If I had so many international academics, UI, the same thing, and the rest of them. UI, where you have people like BJ Dudley, strong intellectuals that if you enter, you are afraid, you are not sure of yourself if you enter UI. Because the academics were thick, they were real scholars, and the rest of them. And it's still easy to do this. All you just need to do is to invest, fund educational system. The money that is voted for newspapers for a senator is, it's just equivalent of what a lecturer earns in a month, a professor earns in a month. Less than $500. It is a shame. I think I made a reference to it, somehow. You can, if you want to transform society, you need state power to do so. Without state power, you can't transform society. But beyond that, the political atmosphere, is highly polluted. You have state actors who are not there to build, who are not there to transform society, but who are there to self-aggrandize, accumulate resources for themselves and their cronies. That's what you have. Maladministration. That's what you have. So, if you have that structure, unless there's a contention with that structure will be reified, that it becomes extremely difficult to change society. Look at the consequence of the way we have misgoverned our country. Every Nigerian wants to go abroad. Professionals are leaving in droves. So if they leave, who is going to build the country? So I believe that it is possible to create sanity zones. By experimenting with what I call enclave paradigm. People will say, yes, every other thing is bad in Nigeria, but there's a state that is getting it right. So that is the, overriding rationale for my intervention in politics, especially in Edo State. The process is still on to get our candidates out, and one is optimistic that one may have the opportunity to serve our people and to, create a sanity zone, an exemplary, sphere of governance for Nigerians to see. Maybe 2 points, really, from your question. Governance. Governance, then electoral, deficits in the system. If you talk about governance, governance is usually about the people. As a political scientist, I've read Western philosophers, from Plato, Aristotle, to J.S. Mill, David Bertrand, all of these people, Jeremy Bertrand, sorry. What they are all concerned in their philosophical articulation is how to achieve happiness for society. And so society is created in order to create a basis for happiness for humanity. Because individuals cannot surmount, the burden of nature. And therefore, you create a community for that, for our social life. We have negated that largely in Nigeria. And so we need to re-engineer governance. Re-engineer governance in ways that it can become meaningful and create a basis, for happiness of our people. So it means that government must reprioritize and focus on, those vitals, existential vitals. People must have a roof over their head. People must be able to feed, clothe themselves. If you can't do this, you are not governing. Well, I will just talk about John Keats. It's an English poet. He said that much of life is miserable. He said happiness is an interlude. It's an interlude. So if you understand this, so define a purpose for your life such that you can maximize the interludes of happiness. And that is when you must acquire a skill. You must acquire so that you can be relevant in the productive process in the country. Acquire a skill. Get education. Education, is elevating. Education is elevating. Be self-reliant. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. These things are very important.